looking at the Lynx, they lost a lot of talent this offseason. You know, Alana Smith, Jessica Shepard, Bridget Carlton, Tisha Heidemann. Would it be the worst thing in the world if, like, hey, we have Olivia Miles, Nafisa Collier rests for a little while, gets her body back together, and we get a high draft pick in 2027? Or is that, like, not a tenable outcome for a Cheryl Reeve team?
Listen, I don't want to by any means lead anybody to believe that I know Cheryl or the Lynx organization on a personal level, but I just got to say the Lynx are not tanking, my opinion. Yeah. Maybe we got to get Cheryl on and get hers, but when you look at the history of that franchise and to your point, their history in the postseason, not only does that, I think support the idea that this is not a tanking team.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to No Off Season. I'm Sabreena Merchant.
And I'm Annie Costable.
And today on the show, more big questions for the upcoming WNBA season, specifically for the teams in the middle of the pack. I think Annie has literally characterized these as I have questions about these teams. We're going to talk about the ones stuck between rebuilding and really contending, and we're asking how high is the bar for success, how well have they handled their assets, and what should their expectations really be for 2026? But first, Annie, you just joined The Athletic last week, and you are on your third podcast of the week. First one with me. How are you feeling? Good? Vocal cords are all set up for this show? How are we doing?
I mean, listen, I'm going through each guest or each person I'm paired with, and I'm making a list of favorite, we could improve here, okay. Least favorite. So, girl, watch yourself.
A high bar set with Alyssa yesterday.
We had a really good time. Alyssa and I, we just kept saying, when we started the podcast, that who gave us permission to do this? We need supervision. And then we ended up having a great time. So with you, I feel like similar to Chantel, I'm going to be led in a very steady direction. You guys are the stalwarts, the franchise,
the
franchise pillars, the steady, sturdy voices of the pod. So I trust where you're going to take us.
Well, speaking of steady and sturdy, I want to talk about a franchise that does not exemplify that at all in the Chicago Sky, who had their preseason game against Atlanta, a very exciting game because of the welcome back of Angel Reese to Chicago for the first time since the trade. You wrote about this game on the site, but, obviously not as big of a deal as if Angel were to come back for a regular season game. Side note, I kind of wish they would have just let her come back for a regular season game, but hey, she played in Chicago. Atlanta won 87-78. Annie, what were some of your big takeaways coming out of that game and what Angel looks like in Atlanta?
Yeah, I mean, people love to tell you you're wrong. Let me start there. If you make one observation and people are like, hey, that's not right. And you're like, whoa. We only
Welcome to the internet, Annie.
Right. We only got to see 12 minutes, so my bad. But anyways, my initial takeaway was watching Angel work with this amount of space with these guards was really exciting. And I think when you consider what's possible in that system, because again, this is something I've been emphasizing since Camilla and Angel got paired together when the Sky drafted the both of them, is how is that going to work with the two of them who are very similar, And as we saw over those 2 years, it didn't. And so now Angel's in this system where she's not just playing alongside, scoring guards. She's playing alongside two of the best scoring guards in the league. And that frees her up in so many ways and also opens up so many possibilities for her game to grow in the sense of, the assists that are possible, the pick and roll game possibilities. There was a moment during the game, she dropped a dime to Jordan Canada. It was such a perfectly placed pass that I'm really excited to see how that lane of her game grows. The one thing that I think still needs to be emphasized is her efficiency. You know what I'm saying? This is an area of her game that when she locks that up, that's the only side of her game right now that you really could point to and be like, okay, this is what needs to develop significantly. And other than that, I think the possibilities with her in that group are really intriguing.
Yeah, I like the idea of her just, hitting Alicia Gray and Ryan Howard on those handoffs because she's operating so much from the perimeter. I do wonder like what her best front court pairing is going to be, whether that's next to Naz, whether that's next to Bree Jones when she comes back. Even Medina Okad has been pretty nice during the preseason for Atlanta. But, I mean, the spacing, like you mentioned, her fit with Camila Cardoso being a tough, just like positionally with the two of them in Chicago. It wasn't that like the two of them played so similarly. It was also that Chicago just had no spacing beyond them. Like their guards were not exactly hitting a lot of threes. So to have, Ryan Howard, one of the best high volume shooters, or at least highest volume shooters in the WNBA, and then Alysha Gray, who was so efficient last year, I think all of that is just going to help Angel so much in Atlanta. And when you think about efficiency, well, that's like literally the buzzword with Carl Semesco. So it's got to get better or else Angel's just not going to play as much, I don't think.
Right. And I think another point to that in, again, this system is, in Chicago, Angel's rookie year, I know she was playing for a coach. She had a great personal relationship. And then last year, Tyler comes in and switches things up. But Angel never really had a sturdy veteran or a coach who just, was capable of, I don't want to say ripping her because I don't know what the relationship is like in Atlanta, but like just a level of accountability that a player of her stature who does immediately come in with this presence that, quite frankly, not everyone is on her level, right? And so when you're a player like that, you need other players like that you are going to push you to be the best version of yourself.
Right,
you're going to need a coach that's capable of pushing you to be the best version of yourself. And I think Carl seems like he could be that guy. I mean, even his quote about, telling Angel, come into my office, tell me how you think you could fit into this system, and then I'm going to tell you what I think. And I think that really stood out to me. And then the other thing too is like Alysha Gray and Ryan Howard are budding superstars in this league. Those are players, and Brianna Jones it's like this roster has players that all-stars, exactly, that really command respect. And that's not to say by any means Angel didn't respect her teammates in Chicago. I'm just saying I think alongside these players, there's an accountability factor that maybe wasn't quite there to the same degree in Chicago. And I am very interested to see what that pulls out of Angel.
Yeah, Angel has always been very forthcoming about she wants to play with great players, even if that means changing her role. Like, I think that's why USA Basketball has always been so important to her. And I mean, you talk about the coaching hard, like think about where she came from in college, Brenda Fries and Kim Mulkey, right? Like she can take it from coaches who are accustomed to coaching hard. And again, Carl Semesco doesn't have the same like fiery personality as those two coaches. Probably a good reason for that too, but definitely has gotten the best out of his players in Atlanta in his tenure so far with the Dream. But there's a lot of preseason basketball happening, and we don't need to dive into all of it because, to be fair, not all of it is the very best high-quality basketball.
Right.
If any of you watched the Portland-Seattle game the other night, my sincerest apologies. 61 fouls in a preseason game feels like grounds for dismissal for some of these officials. Like, let's move things on. Move things along.
Yikes. Capital Y.
All right, so moving on from preseason basketball to our preseason questions. We have another set of 5 teams that we're going to be talking about today. And these are not quite the rebuilding teams. They're ones that we think they're going to fall somewhat in the middle of the pack, kind of contending for the postseason. That's Chicago, Golden State, Phoenix, LA, and Minnesota. And I think where I kind of want to start with just big picture is, I would imagine that for all of these teams, not making the postseason is going to be a sign that this season was a failure. So, Annie, what do you think about just the general vibe of like these 5 teams that we've grouped together? Do you think that they all have to make the playoffs this season, or is there sort of a gradation of how they stand?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to phrase it. Anything less than a playoff appearance would be deemed a failure. However, I don't necessarily know that all of these teams are going to make the playoffs. Like looking at them and the rosters that they have together, the coaches that are in place, what they're trying to build, anything less than a playoff appearance, yes. We, as the pundits, I think could characterize this as a failure. Now, when you look at how some of these teams have shaken out. I think, and just the kind of assumption that the teams we talked about, me and Alyssa talked about the other day, maybe someone from that category surprises us. Well, that means someone here could surprise us in the opposite way. And so I'm kind of looking at this group like, who's it gonna be that doesn't make the playoffs? And I'll save my opinion for when we talk about them.
Right, and it's harder to make the playoffs this year, right? Like there are 8
Yeah.
playoff teams, and now there are 15 teams. So it's not like
Yeah.
3 years ago when only 4 teams missed the playoffs. Now 7 teams are going to miss the playoffs, and that means in addition to the 5 we talked about yesterday, there are at least a couple more in this list who are not going to make the postseason. And I think the place we should start here is maybe the team where it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if they missed the playoffs, because they haven't exactly mortgaged all of their future to get to this point, and that is the Minnesota Lynx. And the reason I say that it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world for them to miss the playoffs is because at the start of all of this is Napheesa Collier, who isn't going to be healthy for at least the first couple months of the season. And when you don't have your best player, it just changes the outlook of the season, right? Like Minnesota is historically a team that makes the postseason, other than 2022 when Napheesa Collier was also out because she was carrying a baby. They haven't really missed the postseason in more than a decade, right? So this is a team that values success, consistently performs to that level, and they draft well enough or make good enough trades so that they don't need to draft in the lottery, right? But do you think, I realize we just said that it would be a failure if these 5 teams miss the playoffs, but like looking at the Lynx, they lost a lot of talent this offseason. You know, Alana Smith, Jessica Shepard, Bridget Carlton, Tisha Heidemann. Would it be the worst thing in the world if like, hey, we have Olivia Miles, Napheesa Collier rests for a little while, gets her body back together, and we get a high draft pick in 2027? Or is that like not a tenable outcome for a Cheryl Reeve team?
Listen, I don't want to by any means lead anybody to believe that I know Cheryl or the Lynx organization on a personal level, but I just got to say the Lynx are not tanking. My opinion. Maybe we got to get Cheryl on and get hers, but when you look at the history of that franchise, and to your point, their history in the postseason, not only does that, I think support the idea that this is not a tanking team, but they did get Olivia Miles, right? They have a player that I think could be the future of their franchise. And to the point of how Cheryl's built teams in the past, I mean, that organization, in my opinion, is so great at talent evaluation. I talked about this with Alyssa yesterday in the sense of saying, when Cheryl talks about her teams and she gets to talking her about like, oh, we were underrated or people didn't believe in us. It's
they picked us ninth.
Right. It's oftentimes because the people on the outside evaluating are looking at teams with the flashiest rosters or with the most all-stars, MVP caliber players. And Cheryl's often building teams that don't necessarily, aren't loaded with players like that, but have, are some of the highest impact players in the league. I mean, their last 2 rosters, I think, are examples of that. And so when I look at this roster, I don't see one that needs to tank or would even have an easy time tanking. You know what I'm saying? I think they're going to have some breakout performances from players who, because of the depth last year, maybe weren't given that same type of opportunity to shine. And so obviously Fee being out, no question, that's going to be big. But yeah, I just have a hard time believing any coach or any team coached by Cheryl Reeve is tanking. Dude, I could literally imagine her listening to this right now and be like, what? Absolutely not.
To be clear, I'm not advocating for Minnesota to tank. I'm not saying that they're even going to be tanking. I'm just saying, like, if that ended up happening, like, let's say Fee takes a little bit longer to come back from her injury, or, the new pieces don't gel as quickly as possible, I don't think that they're set up as poorly as some of these other teams if they don't make the playoffs this year. It wouldn't be catastrophic for their organizational future in the way that, Chicago and LA have surrendered future draft assets, right, to get to this point. Minnesota's not there, right? They have a very clear identity for their future, whether or not they make the playoffs this year. It's just, like you, I can't really see them not making the playoffs just because they're coached too well. Like they still have Kayla McBride, they still have Courtney Williams, they still have Nafisa Collier coming back for the second half of the season. I'm very bullish on Olivia Miles. I thought she should have been the number one pick in the draft. Like, there's just so much talent here that I'm really excited to see what it looks like, with all these spaces. Because 2 years ago, we didn't know what Alana Smith could look like in a full-time role. We didn't know that Courtney Williams is capable of being a point guard like this, although there were glimpses of it in Chicago under James Wade. But I loved seeing that developmental arc over the last 2 years. And now, Nia Coffey in Minnesota, or their young draftee who reminds me of a mini Fee, Kosu, their Russian pick from last year. They've got some young players who could benefit from this opportunity. And I think they're in the best possible developmental system with Cheryl Reeve. But there's a couple directions the season could go if things turn out a certain way.
Yeah. Totally. I mean, if they turn out that way, to your point, they're in a great position. But I'll also say Cheryl's great at picking apart other teams' draft picks. I mean, all she's got to do is call Chicago up again and be like, "Hey, you want to trade one spot for this pick swap?" And she'll end up with another Olivia Miles. So I think I get what you're saying in the sense that they have the draft capital where that could benefit them long term. But I just think the sustainability of that franchise shows they don't got to tank. They've never had to tank, and they've maintained relevance, and not only relevance, but steady dominance in this league to a extremely impressive degree. It's actually it's actually insane when you look at it.
Yeah.
So we go from a team that has what's in the water over there?
One of the most historically dominant in the WNBA to one of the newer teams, and that's Golden State, who came onto the scene a lot better than I think most people expected, although definitely not within their own locker room. They had these expectations of making the playoffs. And now you have the idea of okay, well, we were the surprise team, the first expansion team to make the playoffs. What is the encore in Golden State, right? How do you build on the success of what they achieved in 2025?
I mean, looking at what they got in free agency, or who they got, I should say, with Gabby Williams, I think, again, their identity is clearly on the defensive end, but now you have a franchise player in a way that one could argue you didn't before. I know Veronica Burton really became, one of their stars in a sense, or someone that has really kind of carried that torch in being a franchise type player. But with Gabby being there locked in through 2028, to me this season, I don't know that you have to improve upon your standing in the sense of anything more than, again, another playoff appearance. I think if you could remain steady, then next year could be the year that they break through and get, these all-star caliber players like Gabby to build around what they have established there that carries over from last year to this year. But I just have major questions about how this team is going to run.
Well, let's start with those questions then, because I think my first one is defensively. I mean, the talent on this team is just unbelievable. Trying to dribble the ball against Veronica Burton and Gabby Williams is going to be a nightmare for opposing backcourts. But
Literally.
You still got to score the ball, right? And Gabby Williams, being paid like a franchise player, they're clearly valuing her like a franchise player. She's never had to carry the offensive burden for a WNBA team. We've seen her do it in Europe. We've seen her do it for the French national team. But her career high points per game is 11.6. That's not what Golden State is bringing her in to do. So are they gonna have the same offensive success they had last year when they sort of surprised teams last year? Or, where is that scoring punch coming from? Because I thought, Temi was a pretty important, just big in that lineup. They didn't lose a ton, right? They still have Janelle Salon coming back, still Ileana Repair, Tiffany Hayes, Kayla Thornton's healthy this year. It's just so many of their players are they're very versatile because they can switch defensively and do all these things on the wing, but they are all still wings. And I'm just wondering what it all looks like offensively. That's my number one question, is who is scoring all of the points for Golden State?
I'm just imagining Natalie in that locker room and on that court being like, defense wins championships. We don't need to score more than 10 points if we hold them to 9. No, but I think maybe, and I don't mean to answer your question with a question, but I'm now wondering how much Natalie is going to look at how Gabby's used, which now that I'm even saying this out loud sounds so moronic because it's like, of course, I'm sure she's looking at the tape of Gabby playing for France. But
Yeah.
maybe
They got
we
a lot
see,
of French players. Yeah.
Right. Maybe we see Gabby in a role that mirrors what she does for France. I don't know, because again, looking at this roster, and it's so hard to have these conversations this early, we're really putting ourselves out there to stand on not a whole lot, guys, because we haven't seen
Standing
these
on some
teams
bad
play.
preseason basketball.
Yeah, we're standing on shaky ground, okay? So be kind in the comments, folks. But yeah, no, when you look at this roster top to bottom, I'm like, who's going to be tasked with leading the offense? I do not know when I look at this lineup straight away. I do not know.
Yeah, and I think they're one of the more interesting rosters just to even like figure out who's going to make it, because obviously a lot of drama on draft day when they trade the pick that was Flau'jae Johnson for Marta Suarez and a future pick, and like, is Marta Suarez making this roster as a full-time player, or is she going to be a developmental player? And like, you really just traded away the number 8 pick in the draft for someone who might not be able to make your full 12. Like, that's interesting, right? Like, there's obviously they have a lot of talent on the team, but like, again, fit is like a big question for me. Playing like that hard in a year when like a lot of your players are going to be going to the World Cup in September, obviously a big challenge. And just now that like everybody has the book on how a Natalie Nakase team looks, and like this is how Golden State's going to run its actions. I don't know. I think we talk about like sophomore slumps a lot, right? And like Golden State is a sophomore, and they had this very promising rookie season, better than any WNBA rookie, so to speak. And I'm not saying that they can't deliver on that again, because they've obviously retained most of the good players on their team. But I just think sustaining is a much bigger challenge than coming out on the scene hot, which is why like their contrast with Minnesota is so interesting, because they are the masters of like sustaining success in the WNBA.
Yeah, when you put it that way, it is an interesting kind of or I'm having this thought of, you know, this team in my opinion got better by adding Gabby Williams, but the sustained success is going, to your point, be tough in their sophomore season, because like you said, everybody's got their got their resume now. They know how a Natalie Nakase team is going to operate, how it's going to run. They're going to know how to take advantage of them in certain ways. And so it's really a question too of how innovative Natalie is going to be in year 2, which that is something I'm excited to see, because she's proven herself as one of the premier talents as far as coaches go. Totally. And I think it'd be foolish not to think or not to know that she's coming in with something up her sleeve, because again, not to overemphasize this, but when you look at this roster, there's just not a lot of offensive threats here. So how is she going to make it work?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the fun part, right? Like, we don't know the answers, but I wouldn't bet against Natalie Nakase just based on everything that she was able to accomplish in year 1. And, you know, they have so much going for them with the infrastructure, with that home crowd. It's very hard to play in Golden State with all of that energy coming in from the fans. And I think they have a very bright future as an organization. It's just getting all of the pieces together in this year is, I don't know, it looks weird. But again, like, it looked weird last year and it worked out just fine. So.
I know. I'm honestly like just imagining these early podcasts of ours are just basically here to piss everybody off, because we're like, how is this gonna work? We have no idea. And then they're gonna be like, hey, remember when you da-da-da-da. So anyways, early apologies, guys.
Yeah. The Gabby Williams Veronica Burton backcourt, like, just seeing how that works is honestly one of my most interesting things of the year.
I'm so thrilled. Yeah. You know what they're gonna be? They're gonna be the team where you know, you're middle of the season and you're a contender or just, you know, at the top of the league, and you're like, fuck, we got to play Golden State this week. Like, damn, you know?
It's a lot.
You're just like
They make
at
you
that
work.
exhausted, right? At that exhausted period in the league or in the season, and you look and you're like, you just don't want to play them. That's who they're going to be.
Yeah. And again, with 7 teams missing the playoffs, like the bar is just higher to be a postseason team this year. So they've got to be better. And I'm sure that was their goal coming into the year. Like they said their goal last year was to win. They made the playoffs. I'm sure that's their goal again, is to make the playoffs. And that's going to, again, require some level of improvement, which is why, all of these questions exist about how everything fits together. But I think that's enough of wishy-washing about Golden State when we clearly have no answers about how this is going to go.
Sorry, guys. Nothing
We'll
brilliant
meet you on the other
but...
side of the break with even more questions, hopefully ones that we can actually answer.
All right, guys, welcome back. Sabreena, I got a question for you now on the team that even when we were not working together, I always was like, Sabrina's got the pulse on LA. No one's topping Sabreena when it comes to the Sparks. So with this franchise, I mean, looking at this team, it really seems like identity, once again, is the big question. Their defense was one of the worst in the league last year, but their offense was another story. So for me, I'm wondering if this is the year where things balance out a little bit more, considering who some of their pickups were in free agency, the one being Nneka Ogwumike that really jumps off the page in terms of maybe adding to some of that balance on the defense and offensive end.
Yeah, just to, hit home how bad they were defensively. If they had made the playoffs and they were about 1 game out of making the playoffs, they would have been the worst defense in WNBA history to make the playoffs. And as it stands, they were the best offense in WNBA history to miss the playoffs. So they were a very imbalanced team in 2025.
Yeah.
Lynn Roberts comes from Utah. She obviously has a system that worked really well in college to generate offense, and it worked pretty well in LA. It's just they also could not do anything on the other end. And you see that intention in some of their offseason acquisitions, getting Nneka Ogwumike to help bolster the front court defense, getting full seasons, honestly, with Ray Burrell and Cameron Brink, who are among their better defenders on the team, and then bringing in Ariel Atkins, that swap with Rickea Jackson, where Ariel Atkins is one of the better guard defenders in the league, too. They were very clear, like I just came back from media day, they're very clear about we didn't want to overcorrect, right? Like our offense was our strength, and we didn't want to give up what was so beautiful really about this team last year in the hopes of chasing defensive gains, because they did believe that some internal improvement, some changes on the coaching staff, they brought in Ebony Hoffman as an assistant who was the defensive coordinator essentially on Seattle the last few years, and Seattle had a top 3 defense each of the last 3 seasons. So they believe that can help a lot in terms of just fixing some of their defensive principles. But they still want to be like the Lynn Roberts, pace and space, kicking out for threes, that type of offense, just with a little bit more resistance on the other end. And I think with all the veterans, with Atkins, with Ogwumike, it is going to help them just be smarter on that end of the floor, honestly. I do wonder, their rim protection is an open question to me, because they're not starting a traditional center, right? It's going to be Dearica and Nneka starting at the 4 and the 5, and both of them are a little undersized to be guarding 5s. They're obviously very athletic and long, and they can move really well, but they're not blocking shots at the rim. That's gonna be Cam off the bench. So I still have a lot of questions really about their defense, but I understand at least what the goal is, to get them to be the 10th best defense out of 15 instead of the worst in the league.
Yeah. So hearing all of that, honestly, my immediate thought is about Cam and realistically where she goes in year 3, right? Because to your point, with Dearica and Nneka at the 4 and 5, and Cam coming off the bench or expected to, what are the expectations for her from the franchise as far as being a player that can anchor this franchise this early in her career? Is that the expectation?
Yeah, I don't think it is to anchor the league, the team right now, because you mentioned she's going into year 3, but really she's only played 34 games in the WNBA, less than 1 full season. And one of those games she blew out her ACL within the first few minutes, right? So they kept saying 33 games that she's played in the WNBA, and she's much younger than somebody who would be going into her third season. Like, she's played less than half as many games as Rickea Jackson, who was in the same draft class with her, for the Los Angeles Sparks. So I think that's why they're still bringing her along a little bit slowly. They're bringing her off the bench. They want Nneka and Diarca to be able to, give her some offensive insurance, essentially, like, so that she doesn't have to be a number one option on both ends of the court. Because, like, when she's on the court, defensively, they're going to funnel everything to her. Like, they trust her ability to be a shot blocker, to recover, to clean up their mistakes on the perimeter. But they can't have her do that and also, like, score 18 to 20 points and be like a franchise player right away. Like, they just don't want to put that kind of pressure on her, especially because they're not rebuilding right now. They're trying to make the playoffs. Like, this is a team that has missed the playoffs for 5 consecutive years, and they have 2 draft picks to show for it. They have Ray Burrell and Cameron Brink. And with all due respect to Ray Burrell, Cameron is the only one who profiles as like a potential franchise superstar, right? So, like, this is what they have to show for their extended rebuild period. They believe Cam is going to get there, but right now they want to surround her with veterans who can sort of like incubate her on that way. And like, that's where Nneka is so important, because they've had a relationship for years, right? Nneka went to Stanford, Cam went to Stanford. They've known each other forever. And Cam is so comfortable going to her and just personally and learning from her as a basketball player. So I think that partnership's really important. And then Cam and Diarca have been like this Mama D partnership, on the Sparks for a very long time too. So
Yeah.
I don't think they want Cam. Like, obviously that draft class, very hyped. We've seen what Caitlin and Angel have done, but like Cam, just because of her injury, is not on that timeline. Like, she'll get there. That's what they expect, but they're not expecting her to do that this year.
So when you consider bringing in Nneka, you've got KP at the 1. Who's going to be trusted to create consistent offense? Is it still KP, or who's their go-to?
Yeah, so this is literally what I asked Reagan today, is so much of their success last year came from Plum and Aleman together. And Aleman is a very traditional pass-first point guard, and they lost her in the expansion draft because they wanted to keep, all of those other players that we've mentioned.
Yeah.
So the thing is, like, with the Lynn Roberts offense, they don't really envision it as like we have a point guard, we have a 2 guard, we have a wing, yada, yada, yada. Like, they want offense to be initiated from everywhere on the court, and they believe that Nneka can initiate some offense, Diarca can initiate some offense, Kelsey can, Ariel can. Kelsey's going to run a lot of point. Like, I think the plan is for her to start at the point next to Ariel at the 2, and then Ray Burrell would be at the 3. But it's going to be a very democratic offense, for lack of a better word, and not like Kelsey just like high ball screen, running a pick and roll, like doing all of the actions herself, because that's really not how you maximize what Kelsey Plum does, right? Like, she's so lethal coming off the ball and coming off of screens, and her movement makes her so difficult to guard. So they want her off the ball too. But just the way the roster is built, like, they don't have another guard who makes sense to put in the starting lineup to like displace an Ariel Atkins or a Ray Burrell, right? So I think the ball handling responsibilities are going to come up and down the roster.
So another really interesting point about this team, when you look at the roster construction, is, at least in my opinion, is the fact that Kelsey and Nneka are unrestricted next year. Yeah. And so this team obviously is the trade for Ariel was, I think, to all of us a sign, okay, they're a team that's wants to make the playoffs this year. They're done with rebuild mode. They're in win now mode. But when I see those contracts, my question is, what long term is the plan? And that's not to say at all that I have any type of insight like these two won't be back next year, but you can't bank on that, right? And so I'm just curious what their long term plan is beyond this year, right? Because I don't want to sound like a hater, but I don't know that they're a championship team this year. So how much are they talking about this season being one to build off of? Or is the messaging immediately that of win now being championship contention, which they kind of sounds crazy to me.
Yeah, they've been trying to win now for a few years, right? Like, they traded the pick that became Dominique Malonga for Kelsey Plum. Like, that's a 10-year gap in their ages, and we'll see what Dominique Malonga ends up being, but like, that's quite the prospect to trade away, when you're still a rebuilding team, right? And I think there's some like contractual strategy decisions that, and led them to signing KP to a 1-year deal because they cored her. And so if they had signed her to a more, then they couldn't use the core in previous or like subsequent seasons. So like at least the core like washes out on KP now and they can use it again next year on somebody else. So maybe that was part of it. But Kelsey Plum talks as if this is like a full chapter of her WNBA career. Like she did the thing in Vegas where she was secondary, tertiary, sometimes even number 4 option on that team. And they were very successful, but she wanted to lead a team. She wanted to try to win as the de facto number 1 option. And, they got close to making the playoffs last year. I don't think there was a lot of concern within the organization that they were going to lose her based on the fact that they missed the playoffs. But she sounds very committed to this process, right? And like all of the organizational changes that the Sparks have made, bringing in Lynn Roberts, building the practice facility, changing the player experience. I mean, they were able to do training camp in San Diego this year when like they literally just didn't have the money to go outside of LA for recent seasons, right? Like it's an expense to take your team out of their homes, right? And like give them room and board basically for like another week outside for training camp. And like that was something that Sparks couldn't do or like refused to do previously. And now they're just committing more and more to that experience. So I think she sees enough that she wants to stay here. And like this is a really like it's part of her legacy, right? Like that she wants to turn the Sparks around. And so I think Nneka's future is a little bit more up in the air because she's older, right? She turns 36 this year. How much longer she wants to play in the WNBA, like who knows? But Kelsey, they very much are talking about as like a long-term piece on the Sparks. And the fact that her contract, which there's a lot silly about her contract, like the $999,999.99 of it all, is obviously very silly.
I know.
When she specifically said today, like, I'm so happy that the CBA gave us 7-figure salaries. And it's like, well, not you, Kelsey. But
that picture of the little fan giving her $1 to bring her to $1 million. I'm like, oh my God. And, I thought that was hysterical. I thought that was so funny. But to your point, I'm glad you brought that up because Kelsey has said that a few times publicly of like, I want to be a player that helps bring this franchise back into title contention. And so, I think if the outside is trusting in that messaging that she's been saying pretty consistently, then you could bank on her re-signing next year. But
frankly, they don't have a lot else to bank on, right? Like I just said, they traded away the number 2 pick to bring in Kelsey Plum. So she is their future. Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying is the risk, right? Because Kelsey is only signed to a 1-year deal. And if it goes sideways this year, she really could, take her talents elsewhere. So again, I think the messaging, if we're leaning on that messaging, then you could expect Kelsey to be back and helping bring, follow through with her desires to help bring that team back into title contention. Another point guard who signed with the team to help bring them back to title contention, maybe not in the same way, actually in quite a different way, but has said that was the reason they wanted to sign with this team, is Courtney Vandersloot in Chicago. She's talked a lot about...
I thought you were talking about Skylar Dickens.
No.
Courtney Vandersloot, okay.
I know. Courtney, when she came back to Chicago last year, said, I want to help bring this franchise back to the place it was when I left. And, tall task considering where she's at in her career, but that's what she's trying to do. Last year, obviously, wow. I mean, I don't think we want to open that door again. We can if you want, but
I have never felt sillier than I did last year. Like literally a week into the season, when I was like, I think Chicago could be good, and then nope.
Listen. Nobody took, I think, a crazier L than me or from a reporter standpoint, let me be clear. Like
this guy took a pretty hard L.
Yeah, they took a really hard L. But I'm saying from a reporter standpoint, because when they traded for Ariel Atkins, I saw the vision because I watched James Wade make certain moves to get players and trade away draft stock, and it didn't immediately lead to the championship, obviously, but he made these moves over the years that brought the team to 2021. He was slowly but surely positioning the team to win a title. And so when I saw that, knowing the hurdles that the Sky face outwardly because of the the opinion of that franchise and how it's run and how they've struggled to get free agents, I thought these vets are the bridge that the Sky needs to get to 2026 free agency and be in a position to sign top talent. I was wrong. All right? Who wants to clock it? I was wrong. Not only did they suffer a ton of injuries, but it didn't work. And so now they're in this position where Jeff went out and pulled off a ton of noteworthy free agency moves, starting with trading Angel Reese. But the question, and maybe I'm even more of a skeptic because I saw the vision in 2025, but my question once again is, how does it translate on the court? And how long does it take Tyler to truly establish an identity there? Because last year there was no identity established, and now you're starting from scratch again. So that was a whole lot. I don't know what specifically you want to respond to, but I'm going to give you the floor.
Yeah, I think the Sky are in a very similar position to the Sparks because they have made the moves that kind of require them to succeed this season, right? Like, they traded their 2025 draft pick to Washington in the Ariel Atkins deal. They traded their 2026 draft pick to Minnesota in the Angel Reese deal. Spoiler alert, neither of those players on the team for Chicago anymore. They don't have the rights to their 2027 draft pick because that was also in the Ariel Atkins deal. So we could see for the third consecutive year that the Sky end up trading a lottery pick to another team because they missed the playoffs when they thought that they were betting on their future, and to be clear, like, they only give up a swap in the 2027 deal, but still that would require them, if they ended up giving up a pick.
We've seen them mess up swaps in the past.
We've seen them mess up swaps.
We've seen them mess up
I think
swaps.
they're a little bit guarded in that swap because Washington projects to be pretty bad this year anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, they've given up a lot of future assets, and they gave up their 2028 pick to bring in J.C. Sheldon to be a defensive guard on this team, right? So it's not like they can refill the coffers.
They did get picks back from Atlanta, though, in the Angel Reese trade.
First-round picks from Atlanta in 2027, 2028. But, like, the way we're talking about Atlanta, we don't expect those to be excellent picks, right? Like, those expect to be double-digit picks in the first round. So they don't exactly have a lot of ways of recouping young talent if this season goes poorly, right? And I think they were a lot more successful in free agency than a lot of people may have imagined, like getting Azariah Stevens, Dejanay Carrington, Skylar Diggins. Like, those are all quality, capable players who should help them win in the present. Getting Rickea Jackson for Ariel Atkins, like, honestly, great value proposition. Like, I think Ariel Atkins right now is a better player than Rickea Jackson, but Rickea Jackson on a rookie contract, you're paying her so much less than you were Ariel Atkins, which allows you to, make the other moves you did in free agency. So, like, their offseason this year kind of almost gives you, like, more hope, even though it started with the Angel Reese trade, that they can rebuild on the fly because, like, they've so completely changed the identity of their team from what it was last year when, frankly, like, was there an identity of the team? I don't really know. But I still think that, like, they have to win now because otherwise it's just another year of, like, oh, Chicago thought they were so much better than they actually were, and here they are, and there's another lottery pick that another team has gotten because Chicago was silly in an offseason deal,
Yeah, I would argue that there is no team in the league under more pressure, facing more pressure to win now than the Chicago Sky because of what the last two seasons looked like, from, Teresa Weatherspoon's firing to now everything that transpired, ultimately leading to Angel Reese being traded. This franchise has to prove all of these very questionable moves were not for naught. Is that the saying? We're not for nothing? I was trying to sound fancy there, like Shakespeare. But they have to prove that these moves led to something, right? And they don't have, to your point about the draft picks, they don't have any other option if they don't. And so I think one of the concerns for me when I look at this team and at the pressure on them to win now is who's really going to carry that load on this roster? They obviously have better guard play than they did the last 2 years with Skylar Diggins in play. I also think JC Sheldon is, one of the best defenders when you look back at these last, like, what guard is a better defender than JC Sheldon over these last 2 rosters, that the Sky put together? I think having her in the backcourt and Dejanay, if, and when she is at a full go,
Right.
They have better guards, in my opinion, than they've been able to lean on in the last 2 seasons. But they still, when I look at this roster, don't have a certified bucket getter. Who is the player that they're going to lean on to contribute, every single night? And I've wanted to think it would be Camilla now that Angel's not in the mix. And I know it was just a preseason game, but yesterday really gave me pause watching that game against the Dream. Camilla looked, there were concerns I had about, her being someone that they could rely on night after night. And I think there was, one block shot she had on Angel that I was like, okay, this was her highlight of the night, but that was about it. And so I think even when you think about their future, her and Rakia are these 2 pillars. And my question is, can you depend on Camilla in that way? And if it's not Camilla, is it Rakia? And so I, once again, think on paper, they have a roster that can contend for a playoff spot, and they gotta get a playoff spot, all right? Like, must. But then when you watch them play together, and we have a very small sample size, my question is, can they actually get it done? And furthermore, what's going to happen when they hit a bump in the road? Who's going to be the glue there? Is it Elizabeth Williams? Is it Azrae Stevens? I'm wondering about who's going to keep that team level and focused on the main thing. Yeah.
I think you hit all of my questions, actually. My number one was just, if you're going to decide that Camilla and Angel cannot be a pairing together and you're picking Camilla, you better be sure that she is a day in, day out star for you. And I just have not seen that consistency yet. And like, say whatever you want about Angel Reese, she's very consistent as a WNBA player. She brings that energy level every single night. So the Camilla of it all, like, they even talked about this at South Carolina, where like they had to remind her senior season, like, nobody else is coming to help you. Like, you have to be the glue for us. You have to set the tone with your play every single night. And like, it obviously worked in that undefeated season her senior year in college, but it hasn't shown up consistently in the WNBA. And like that's the future of the Chicago Sky right there, right? Like, Skylar Diggins is older. Azrae Stevens, like, not old necessarily, but like, she's not going to be an MVP caliber player, right? Like, Courtney Vandersloot is older. This is where your upside is with Rakia and Camilla, and I think it's got to be Camilla because that's who they put their bet on. And I think that's the number one question with the Chicago Sky.
Yeah, and not to like keep going back to the history of it all, but when you go back to that 2024 draft, because that, to your point, that's what they were saying by taking Camilla with the number 3 pick and selecting Angel at number 7. You were saying that Camilla is the player above all, Camilla's the franchise player, even though Angel is who Angel is. You didn't select Angel number 3, you selected Camilla. And my question now is, was selecting Camilla at number 3 the move, or should they even have selected Rakia at number 3 and then you have Angel at 7 and it's a different look? I don't know. We can't go back and change what was. This is what is. And again, I just think the Camilla pillar is the Camilla as the pillar is the question for me, because to your point, we have not yet seen that consistency. That doesn't mean we won't. We just have not yet.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up that trade, the number 3 pick that they got to select Camilla in that draft, because that 3 pick takes us to our next team, because they made that trade sending Kalia Copper to Phoenix. And Phoenix made the WNBA Finals last year, but, loses Satou Sabally during the offseason, don't really replace her with a known WNBA commodity. And that's what sort of lands them in this in-between zone for us this year, even though I wouldn't blame you if you called them a contender, wouldn't blame you if, you think that they will be on the playoff, contending line, who knows. But the Mercury are so interesting to me because I think they overachieved, or they exceeded expectations by making the finals last year, by beating the Mercury, by beating the Lynx, and then getting, to play Las Vegas in the finals. But we're still at a situation where I look at the Mercury and there's a lot of talent there. Obviously, Kalia Copper, Alyssa Thomas, DeWanna Bonner, and they have a great scouting department that has signed a bunch of players who I don't know anything about, but I look forward to evaluating in June when they've all come over and played a few games. But, something that I thought about during the finals, just what can you expect from an Alyssa Thomas team? Because this was her 3rd time in the finals, right? She's 0-3 so far. And stylistically, she's just so specific the way you have to build a team around Alyssa Thomas, because she's going to have the ball in her hands, right? Like, you got to have the spacing around her. You've got to have a certain type of defender because, she can kind of defend everything, but you need to have really strong point of attack defenders around her, because she also can roam and get steals and stuff. So there's just a very specific way that the roster has to be constructed around Alyssa Thomas. And I wonder if that ceiling is still a championship team, or if Phoenix has to even reimagine the way that they're constructing their roster, or can they get to that championship point with Alyssa Thomas? Sorry, that was a lot. Main question here. Can they get to a championship with Alyssa Thomas as their best player?
To your point, they have a lot of players on this roster. They have a great scouting staff in Phoenix. Nick Uren, in my opinion, is a great talent evaluator. So they once again can be in a position where they're pointing at everybody and being like, haha, we proved you wrong. That's fine. That's fair. Well, I can admit when I'm wrong when we get to
already
that
have
point.
Once already on the show.
We already have on this point. We are not above admitting when we're wrong here. But when you look at what Alyssa Thomas and DeWanna Bonner, right? Because this is a pair that has gone to finals together for years. They haven't crossed that bridge. And so, when it comes to that pairing, and Alyssa Thomas specifically, what's been missing in these finals appearances that haven't allowed them to get over the hump? I don't really have the answer there.
No one has a higher regular season floor than Alyssa Thomas. She is going to make sure that your team succeeds during the regular season. She is so hard to scheme against in a 44-game season, because she's just different than every other kind of player. There's no really point forward analog that exists like her in the WNBA. And she brings so much effort to every time she's on the court that I have no doubt that this is a playoff team. If Alyssa Thomas is healthy, this is a playoff team, because she can take literally anyone around her and win games during the regular season. It's just during the playoffs when you get to lock in on a scouting report, like we saw Vegas just take away what she wanted to do at the top of the floor with their zone in game 1. Offensively, it was just such a challenge for her. And that was when you had Satou Sabally on the court, And I credit what Phoenix was trying to do this offseason, because if you evaluate where you were in the finals and you're thinking our goal is to win a championship, and we don't think this roster, even optimized, is good enough to win a championship, it takes a lot of guts to say, hey, Satou, we know you're an all-star, but we don't think you're the best fit we can have on this team. I think they probably hoped that they could fill in with a better player than what they ended up doing. I don't think that their offseason ended up necessarily achieving all the goals that they had set out, but it takes a lot of guts to say, hey, we just need to be better. And if that means swapping out an all-star player, then we're going to try it. I do wonder where it leads them ceiling-wise, but really bold. And I think, unfortunately, the expansion draft kind of screwed them because, you watched Lexi Held on Toronto the other day. I know I'm talking about preseason basketball again, but like a really good showing for her for Toronto. And they, protected Kat Westfeld over Lexi Held, and Kat Westfeld goes and tears her ACL 2 weeks later in her, European competition. And like, that's obviously a decision you wish you could take back because now you could have another player, another guard creator on this team going forward. But just kind of an offseason of misses for Phoenix. I do wonder where that leaves them in the postseason, but like, I'm going to put this out there. I do not question that they're going to make the playoffs. Like, I believe in Alyssa Thomas to make the playoffs.
Let me be clear here. Yeah. Where Alyssa Thomas has maybe not been the same type of player in the sense of being able to carry their team to the promised land has been in the postseason. During the regular season, to your point, she's always been trusted to get her team there. And I do want to say that clearly. I just question this team's free agency moves. I don't think they got a single outside free agent in free agency this year.
Not a single one who played in the WNBA last year. Yeah.
So that is, I think, really off for a team that made it to the finals last year. Like, I just, that to me is concerning. And maybe Nick's got all the secrets and to your point, there was strategy behind it, but I'm not seeing the vision yet. That's what I'll say. I'm not seeing the vision yet.
Yeah, and again, it's a team where just because of the way I focus on basketball, I have a very American-specific lens. I don't know a lot about the players who are going to be playing minutes for this roster, beyond those 5 big names that we mentioned. So just like last season where, like, didn't really know who Monica Cole-McConney was, turned out pretty well for them. Like, they're just going to have to keep doing that over and over again because, like you said, they just didn't hit the WNBA free agency well all that hard.
Yeah.
It's weird offseason.
It was a really weird offseason. I mean, I have so many questions. I actually can't wait until they're in town because I have so many questions. So I didn't sound very insightful at all, but that's where I'm at. It was the theme of this episode.
We have questions. These are our questions. We're laying them out for you.
Yeah, guys, I'm doing my best here. I don't really know what to say about this episode other than I laughed a lot with Sabreena, and I did my best.
All right, so we have left you with a lot of up in the air thoughts, about these 5 teams in the middle of the WNBA pack. On the other side of the break, we're going to give you something definitive to hold on to. All right. It is time to set your screens where we give you something to watch for the weekend. And Annie, you have a good idea for us that is kind of basketball related.
The Met Gala. Listen, I said this to Chantel the other day. If I was not a sports journalist, I would want to be like Andy Sachs working at Vogue. I'm so
movie comes out this weekend, by the way. Yep, another thing to set your screens to.
Project Runway 2. Cannot wait. But the Met Gala is on Monday. A'ja Wilson is on the 2026 Met Gala host committee. That's the committee that she serves on. And this event has become a stage for WNBA players, starting with Angel Reese back in 2024. I believe she was the first WNBA rookie because I think before her,
Brittany
didn't
Griner
Sue
had been there.
Yeah, Brittany Griner and Sue had gone. So this in the last 3 years has really taken off because now we've seen Liberty players there. Obviously, Asia's on the host committee. So I think everybody's got to lock in Monday.
Yeah. A beautiful thing to set your screens to, or at least your social media to figure out what everyone's wearing.
Let's talk about who's best dressed. Hit me on social media. I love having these conversations. I always am posting everyone's outfits on Instagram saying who's I like and whose I don't. So hit me on the gram.
Also, like 6 preseason basketball games, but survey those at your leisure. I'm not gonna force you to watch any of them.
Sorry, Shannon. I'm not going to be watching the preseason games. I'm going to be watching the Met Gala red carpet. Shannon's our editor.
All right. And before we do anything else that we're going to regret on this show, thank you so much for listening. That's all we have for today. We'll be back on Tuesday to break down the last 5 teams that we haven't talked about, the ones who we'll put in the contender class of the WNBA. So make sure you tune in for that. And until then, please follow our show if you're watching on YouTube, like and subscribe, tell your friends to check us out, give us a rating, drop a comment. We love to hear from you. We're always reading your questions. We try to bring them on the show as much as possible. On behalf of The Athletic and Annie Costable, I am Sabreena Merchant. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.
No Offseason is hosted by me, Zena Cada, with Chantel Jennings, Sabreena Merchant, and Leja Clarendon. It's produced by Tanika Burrell. Our executive producer is Andrea B. Scott. Monica Compton is our video editor. And Shannon Ryan is managing editor of women's basketball at The Athletic. Thanks for tuning in to No Offseason. To hear more, be sure to like and subscribe. We drop new episodes every Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday.